blackness, that black power, that black pushing them to identify with black culture.
That's the incredible pianist and vocalist Nina Simone, the high priestess of soul.
I have no choice over it. In the first place, to me, we are the most beautiful creatures in the whole world, black people. And to me, we have a culture that is surpassed by no other civilization, but we don't know anything about it.
Nina was brilliant, voluble, charismatic, staggeringly talented, a former child prodigy. And unlike the Scorpions, political, overtly political.
Alabama's got me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn.
That's her 1964 song, Mississippi Goddamn, which she wrote in response to the murder of the civil rights leader, Medgar Evers.
Nina and I went down to the rally in Montgomery after the Selma March.
This is guitarist Al Shackman, one of Simone's closest collaborators, who played with her for 40 years.
So we were standing there, and Martin came up, and people were with him, and Nina, we'd like you to meet Dr. King. And Nina looks at him and just yells out, "I ain't nonviolent." And he says, "Okay, it's okay, sister. You don't have to be. It's okay."
Wow. Was Dr. King shocked when she said that?
No, not at all. He knew where Nina was coming from.
In 1961, Simone got the chance to go to Nigeria for a festival.
An interaction between African artists and American artists.
The festival was put together by a group called AMSAC,
American Society for African Culture,
which had several prominent members, like the novelist Richard Wright and the poet Langston Hughes.
And we landed in Lagos in the middle of the jungle. I mean, to me, it was like a landing strip, and late at night. And the doors open, and suddenly I could smell the jungle coming into the plane. And then I heard the drums, and there was this massive sound of drums out there. And we all deplaned, and people were kissing the ground. We're home, you know, at last.
I'm actually looking at a photo of you and Nina and everyone else just a minute or two after you've disembarked. So you can see the plane. It's an Alitalia plane.
Oh, wow.
People have their instruments, and Nina's there. She's got a big grin on her face, and you're just behind her, looking over her shoulder. But it's an amazing shot with all these people dressed in suits, because that's the way people flew on planes back then, with their instruments and the flash bulb at night as everybody gets off the plane.
Nina was very happy at that point. Langston Hughes was with us, and who was a really dear friend of ours. Nina had never been, and she wanted to be with her people. She turned to me one day and said, "How does it feel for you to be in the minority?" And all around me are my people, but all around you, there's nobody.
The visiting Americans were treated like royalty.
And we stayed at the Federal Palace Hotel, which was this huge grounds, and then at the edge of it was the jungle.
They did 2 shows for a massive crowd in a soccer stadium.
I think we did Little Girl Blue.
What can you do? Little girl, you're through.
Take the A Train. I think we did African Mailman.
And what did Nina think of it all?
She took it all in, and she loved it.
Al, there's something I need to ask you, which is, did either of you know that the American Society of African Culture, this group that sponsored the trip, was a front for the CIA?
I was aware that the CIA had a front organization in the African American community known as the American Society of African Culture.
This is Hugh Wilford.
I think I was the first historian to use the organization's papers, which are at Howard University.
He's a professor at Cal State Long Beach, and he says AMSAC was definitely a CIA front. He interviewed former members of the group who took oaths of secrecy and met with CIA officers. Wilford was digging around through the AMSAC archives at Howard one day when he came across this file.
There was a folder about this performing arts festival staged in Lagos, Nigeria in 1961. And I'm sort of looking down the list of musicians who performed there, and they included Nina Simone.
Wilford thinks that the CIA wanted her to go to Africa for the same reason the State Department sent Satchmo.
It's about winning Africa over in the Cold War, making sure it doesn't go into the communist camp.
But there's one really big difference. It's one thing for the government to pressure Louis Armstrong to go to Africa on a propaganda mission and have him grudgingly but knowingly go along. It's a very different thing to covertly send an artist on false pretenses. And Nina Simone was no patriot. She ended up renouncing the United States and living abroad. She called it the United Snakes of America. It's a strange thing about these stories. We think of culture, or we want to think of culture, as organic and spontaneous, as pure. Nina Simone clearly did. She felt like it gave her a sense of deep connection to the people she met in Nigeria. So it's really unsettling to learn that the hidden hand of government was at work. It's a feeling of dispossession, like someone picked your pocket.
I think it's hard to look at genius.
That's the poet Nikki Giovanni. She was friends with Nina, and she told me that Nina's gifts meant that she could feel alone sometimes because of a sense that everyone was trying to use her in some fashion.
One thing that she knew about our friendship was that I wasn't going to use her. And there were a lot of people that she couldn't say that about. You need a recognition that this is a genius. And I'm going to handle it as lightly as I can, but I'm going to let her know she won't be used.
Nina was very mindful, she had to be, of the dangers of being used by the people around her. But in this case, she was being used by the government, by the CIA, employed as a pawn in their contest against the Soviets.
Knowing that you were used can be very hurtful.
Nina Simone died in 2003. Al Shackman's an old man now, and it was only quite recently that he learned the CIA sent him to Nigeria with Nina way back in 1961. He had never known.
No idea. Had no idea.
And Nina didn't know.
Never. She never knew.
I'll tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. I mean, really, no fear. If I could have that half of my life, no fear.
Al's glad that she never lived to learn the truth.
She would say, again, she's not surprised. That's the government.
I wonder if she would have been angry.
Oh, yeah, I'd say she'd be angry, but angry at what and who?
That's the thing about the hidden hand. Sometimes, even when you know it's there, you can't see it. Coming up, what happens when a CIA guy and a KGB woman find themselves embedded on the same concert tour? That's after this quick break.
I'm Alyssa Bereznak, and over the past year, I've spoken with founders and fans, investors and engineers, employees, celebrities, all to answer one question. What happened to HQ Trivia? An app that drew millions of live viewers and was supposed to be the future of TV, until it wasn't. This is Boom Bust, the rise and fall of HQ Trivia. Listen now on Spotify.
So jazz was a weapon in Africa. And we know now that the CIA was not above tricking an artist into helping them without even knowing it. But by the 1970s, tastes had changed. In 1975, a young man named Dave Hess arrived in Moscow to work at the U.S. Embassy. He didn't look like your average Foreign Service officer.
I had a beard that went down close to my navel, and, of course, the turtleneck.
And he had an unusual mission.
We wanted to get hard rock in.
Dave Hess was one of the first U.S. officials to really try and push rock and roll in the USSR. And I thought if I could understand how and why he did it, it could shed light on how the CIA might have done the same thing with the Scorpions. In a way, Hess had been preparing for this job his whole life. He grew up in Davenport, Iowa, and as a teenager in the 1950s, he became a DJ at a local radio station, and he started playing rock and roll. This did not go over well in conservative Iowa.
But the reason they were screaming at us was because their kids were listening.
Dave ended up joining the Army Security Agency, where he was posted to Taiwan and listened in on broadcasts inside communist China. Then he took the Foreign Service exam, and they sent him to Hong Kong, then eventually to Moscow, as a cultural attaché, which he acknowledges
makes you look like a spook, a CIA plant.
I was going to ask you because how should I put this? Cultural attaché, it's almost the cliche of an official cover, right?
Well, it is in the movies in Hollywood, but not in Washington.
Dave was not a spy, he insists. He was just a State Department civilian with an abiding love for rock and roll.
A root cause of our whole effort was to enhance the freedom of expression inside of the Soviet Union.
So in Moscow, Dave would go meet with his Russian government counterparts, and he would pitch them American rock bands. So you're like going in with a record player?
I would go in and I would play things for them to help talk them through any initial questions they might have.
And how would they react? Were they bopping their heads or were they stone-faced?
They would listen, and sometimes they would politely smile, but there were no tapping toes and no snapping fingers or anything like that. These are people who are supposed to snap their fingers to Marx, not to Howling Wolf.
So he had to pitch American music to the Kremlin. And his first pitch was a fastball right down the middle. He pitched the band America.
The first thing I met was a fly with a buzz and the sky with no clouds.
Despite the name, America actually struck Dave as pretty soft and non-threatening. But they were rejected. So next, he pitched the Doobie Brothers.
The Doobie Brothers, there is no mistaking. These guys are hard rock. I mean, it was loud, it was passionate rock.
But there was a problem. It turned out that one of the Doobie Brothers' album covers, if you opened it up, had a racy photo of a bordello scene inside. So the Kremlin said,
"There's no way we're going to have the Doobie Brothers and their girls here in the Soviet Union. So bang, strike two." Our third pitch
heard that the Russians might be interested in coming to a show.
I think the Soviets had been sending ballet dancers and, classical singers, but it was finally time for them to take some American music.
The way I heard it, they had come to see us 4 times, trying to decide which American group they were going to bring over to the Soviet Union.
We saw these 3 men come in with those great big Russian coats, and they were wearing those hats, fur hats. They looked like something out of Central Casting.
They did not fit into our normal demographic.
And these stern looks on their face.
The Soviets were also looking at the Beach Boys.
Do you have any sense of why they would have picked you guys over the Beach Boys?
There's banjos and guitars and fiddles, and none of the music is offensive.
Our music would not incite any rioting or anything.
Would the Beach Boys incite rioting?
They sang about pretty girls and driving in cars and the freedom of America, and I think that might have been a little too much for the Soviets to handle.
The band played Moscow and Leningrad, but also some of the Soviet republics like Latvia and Georgia, and a 4,000-seat bicycle stadium in Armenia.
In a town called Yerevan. And the venue was an outside bicycle track.
The Armenians they're a wild bunch of folks.
Somebody in the Ministry of Culture had counterfeited another 5,000 tickets and scalped them. The stadium is surrounded on the outside by thousands of people.
And I could just see the KGB guys going, uh-oh, what are we going to do?
15 people would scamper over the fence on the other side of the field.
Suddenly police appeared, trying to get them to stop coming across the walls to hear the band.
It overwhelmed the KGB. They couldn't do anything about it. A revolt in the audience.
Jimmy turned around and said, "What should we do?" And I said, "Keep playing."